The dust was a choking cloud, thick as a shroud, stinging eyes and lungs with every gasp. Under that gritty veil, on the vast plain of Gaugamela, the great Persian host, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, surged forward with a roar. They believed in their numbers, in their chariots with their sides, in the limitless power of their emperor. They believed they were facing mere barbarians. But a different sound was rising from the enemy lines, a low, guttural chant, the rhythmic stamp of heavy boots on dry earth. It wasn't the wild clamor of battle, it was the measured pulse of a single, colossal beast. The ground vibrated with an unnatural hum, a deep thrumming that spoke not of chaos, but of horrifying, disciplined intent. The air, heavy with the metallic tang of fear and the promise of slaughter, began to crackle. For all their glittering armor and their endless ranks, the Persian warriors were about to meet something they could not comprehend. They were about to collide with a wall, not of stone, but of hardened men and 20-foot spears. Before them stood the Macedonian Phalanx, an ancient war machine unlike anything seen before. This wasn't just a formation, it was a living, breathing, weaponized entity designed for one purpose: to crush. Their enemies, vast and proud, would soon learn the terror of facing an unbreakable iron tide, a forest of death that moved as one. It was the mid-4th century BCE, a world dominated by titans and empires. To the east, the Achaemenid Persian Empire stretched from the Aegean to India, a colossus of wealth, power, and ancient might. Its shadow fell across every smaller kingdom, every city-state, a constant threat of absorption or annihilation. Kings and satraps governed vast territories, their armies a patchwork of nations and tribes, unified only by the great king's will. Their wealth was legendary, their traditions centuries old. They saw themselves as the center of the civilized world, and all others as lesser, ripe for conquest or tribute. But in the rough, mountainous north of Greece, a different kind of power was brewing. Macedon, long dismissed as a backwater, a land of hardy, hard-drinking farmers and warriors, began to stir. They were on the fringes, outsiders looking in, often preyed upon, but fiercely independent. Philip II, a king with one eye and an unyielding will, had taken the throne in 359 BCE. He saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. He saw the potential in his rugged people, in their loyalty and their ferocity. He knew they couldn't beat the Persians with conventional armies. Philip forged an army built on a new doctrine, a revolutionary approach to warfare. He disciplined his farmers and herdsmen into professional soldiers, drilling them relentlessly. He understood that individual bravery wasn't enough. It was unity, cohesion, and the proper weapon that would make the difference. He gave them the sarissa. This wasn't just a spear, it was a leviathan. 15 to 20 feet long, tipped with a leaf-shaped iron point, it was a weapon that demanded a new kind of soldier, a new kind of war. Training began before dawn, every single day. The men sweated under the harsh Macedonian sun, their hands blistering from the rough wood of the sarissa. They learned to hold the monstrous spear, not just with strength, but with balance and precision. They marched in formation for hours, the heavy bronze shield strapped to their left arm, the massive spear extended. Left, right, left, right. The cadence was endless, the dust rising around their calloused feet. Each man was a cog, moving in perfect lockstep with the thousands around him. They practiced the drill of closing ranks, presenting an impenetrable hedge of sharpened iron. The first 5 ranks held their sarissas forward, points bristling like a porcupine's quills. The ranks behind them angled their spears upwards, deflecting arrows, adding weight, acting as a human bulwark. The sheer physical labor was immense. Imagine holding 20 feet of wood and metal steady for hours, not in a parade, but under the constant threat of a charging enemy. Their shoulders ached, their muscles screamed. But they pushed through, driven by the knowledge that their survival depended on flawless execution. They learned to eat, sleep, and breathe as a unit. They lived by their equipment, maintaining their bronze helmets, their greaves, and their small, round, hoplite shields, known as the aspis. Their diet was basic but nourishing: barley, onions, dried meat, enough to fuel their punishing training. By the time Alexander, Philip's son, ascended to the throne in 336 BCE, this army was a honed instrument. They were no longer just men from Macedon. They were the Phalanx, an entity with its own terrifying will. They looked across the Hellespont at the vast lands of the Persian Empire, not with fear, but with a cold, hard determination. The long march began. Through Asia Minor, they met Persian forces at the Granicus River in 334 BCE, a baptism of fire that showed the world what Macedon could do. They clashed again at Issus in 333 BCE, where the Phalanx's rigid discipline shattered the great king's personal guard in a narrow coastal plain. But Gaugamela, the battle for the fate of the Persian Empire, was different. It was the open plain that the Persians wanted, where their chariots and cavalry could truly stretch their legs. For weeks, Alexander's army marched, the anticipation a coiled snake in their bellies. On the night of September 30th, 331 BCE, the Macedonian camp was silent, save for the rhythmic breathing of thousands of sleeping men. The Persians, by contrast, had lit 1,000 fires, their camp a sprawling city of light and noise, a confident beacon in the dark. The stench of their campfires, mixed with the unfamiliar smells of exotic animals and spices, carried on the cool desert breeze. Alexander refused to let his men rest, fearing a night attack. Instead, he led them in a forced march, arriving at the battlefield just as the sun began to paint the horizon on October 1st, 331 BCE. The sight that greeted them was staggering. A human ocean stretching further than the eye could see, a vibrant tapestry of banners, glittering armor, and nervous war horses. But the Macedonians stood firm. Their formation was like an iron ruler laid across the plain, perfectly straight, perfectly deadly. The silence in their ranks was deafening, a stark contrast to the distant, rising roar of the Persian host. Each man knew his place. Each grip on a sarissa was firm, each eye fixed on the enemy. Then the signal came. A trumpet blast, sharp and piercing, ripped through the morning air. It was the call to advance, the signal to unleash the living wall. The ground began to tremble, not from enemy hooves, but from the synchronized tread of thousands of Macedonian boots. The phalanx moved forward, slow and deliberate, a juggernaut of bronze and steel. The light caught on the countless sarissa points, turning the leading edge into a shimmering, deadly wave. The air was split by their collective war cry, a deep, primal sound that swallowed the Persian trumpets. Then came the Persian charge, Their scythed chariots, designed to cut swathes through infantry, thundered across the plain. Horses screamed, drivers whipped their teams into a frenzy. They were a terrifying sight, a mechanical wave of destruction. But the phalanx parted, just enough. The sarissas lowered, creating narrow channels. The chariots, caught in the gaps, were met by a storm of javelins and arrows, then trapped by the spears that reformed behind them. Horses reared, drivers were impaled. The carefully planned terror machine stalled, becoming a chaotic mess of flesh and wood. The main Persian line crashed into the Macedonian wall. It wasn't a battle line. It was a physical force, a blunt object meeting a razor-sharp edge. The sound was sickening, the clang of metal, the splintering of wood, the wet thud of flesh. Persian swords, shorter and designed for individual duels, were useless against the 20-foot reach of the sarissa. They couldn't get close. They fought against an unyielding hedge of points, unable to penetrate, unable to break the formation. Men were lifted from their feet on the spear tips, suspended for a moment in bloody agony before being ripped down. The front ranks of the Persians were simply pushed back or impaled, their bodies forming a bloody rampart for those behind them. The smell of fresh blood, mixed with sweat and fear, hung heavy in the air. Panic began to ripple through the Persian ranks. They could not move forward. They could not retreat in an orderly fashion. The Macedonians, a solid block, kept pushing, their deep formation allowing constant pressure and fresh spears to replace any lost. On the flanks, Alexander's companion cavalry, the elite mounted arm, executed a daring maneuver. Feigning a retreat, they drew the Persian cavalry wide, creating a crucial gap in the enemy's center. It was a calculated risk, a move of audacious brilliance. Then, with a furious cry, Alexander wheeled his horsemen and plunged into the exposed Persian center. The phalanx, meanwhile, continued its slow, grinding advance, pinning the enemy, preventing any maneuver. The great king Darius III, watching from his war chariot, saw his carefully laid plans unravel. Caught between the relentless forward momentum of the phalanx and the sudden, devastating charge of Alexander's cavalry, the Persian center buckled. The roar of the battle turned to a collective gasp of terror. Darius, witnessing the collapse, his own life in peril, turned his chariot and fled. This their king gone, the vast Persian host disintegrated. The shouts of command turned into screams of despair. Soldiers threw down their weapons, desperate to escape the carnage. It wasn't a retreat, it was a stampede, a desperate rush for survival. By dusk, the plain of Gaugamela was a desolate, blood-soaked landscape. The cool desert wind, which had carried the Persian roars in the morning, now whispered through the motionless ranks of the dead. The sheer scale of the slaughter was unimaginable. Bodies lay piled in grotesque heaps, men and horses tangled together, their armor glinting dully in the fading light. The air was thick with the coppery stench of spilled blood and the acrid smell of burnt wood from fallen chariots. Alexander, his face grim, his armor streaked with grime and blood, rode slowly across the battlefield. There was no triumphal cheer, no celebratory fanfare, just the quiet exhaustion of victory. His men, many still holding their sarissas, stood silent, their faces etched with the horrors of the day. They had done the impossible. They had shattered the backbone of the greatest empire the world had ever known. The silence of the night was punctuated only by the distant cries of scavengers and the moans of the dying. The work was done, but the cost was clear for all to see. Messengers were dispatched, riding hard across the known world. News of Gaugamela, of the complete and utter defeat of Darius, spread like wildfire. To the Greek city-states, long accustomed to Persian threats, it was a moment of profound relief, a miracle. To the courts of distant Egypt and India, the news brought shock and awe. A new power had arrived, seemingly from nowhere, wielding a weapon that seemed to defy all previous notions of warfare. The old order had been irrevocably broken. By 330 BCE, the Persian Empire officially ceased to exist. Alexander's phalanx, that unbreakable wall of men and spears, had carved out an empire stretching thousands of miles. It was a testament to vision, discipline, and the terrifying effectiveness of a unit that moved and fought as one. Even after Alexander's death in 323 BCE, the phalanx, in various forms, continued to dominate battlefields. Centuries. It proved that a well-drilled, unified force, armed with a purpose-built weapon, could overcome any numerical disadvantage. It was the ultimate demonstration that a nation, unified and determined, can refuse to die, even when facing overwhelming odds.